For topic two, we're going to talk about rounding. This is a topic that you should be at least sort of familiar with, maybe a little rusty at it, but at least familiar with the general process. Um, Classic examples of when we use rounding in the real world, we do this a lot of times with our bills. We'll kind of figure out, okay, my bill is going to be approximately this for my phone bill, my car bill, or my car payment, my rent, food. We'll generally kind of do some estimations. We'll talk about that in a little bit here. But we'll do some rounding with our bills. If you go into a store and you're paying with cash, sometimes we'll round the items to make sure we have enough cash at the end when we go to pay. But for us in this class, we're going to do rounding a good bit. So obviously in this section, we're going to round, but in chapter 9, what we're going to look at next, we will have to round a lot of our answers. When we get into chapter 6, every now and then there will be times to round our answers. Every other chapter in the book that we're going to look at, there will be times where we have to round our answers. So rounding is going to come up from really now until the end of the semester. Okay. So what in the world is rounding? Well, rounding is the process of approximating a number to make it easier to use and understand. So that's why we use rounding sometimes with our like monthly budgets or with our grocery bill or, if we're paying with cash somewhere, we'll use rounding just to make the numbers easier to work with so that we can get what's called an estimation or some approximate value that we can work with. Just easier numbers to deal with. Okay. So how do we round? Well, when you're rounding, you can round whole numbers or you can round decimals, okay? And the process is almost the same until the very end. There's a slight difference, okay? So the first thing is you have to know your place value because the first thing you do with rounding is you locate your rounding digit. Whether it's a whole number or a decimal number, you're going to locate the rounding digit by place value, okay? So again, it's going to be the same thing whether you're dealing with whole numbers or decimals. That should say by place value. I forgot the value in the first one. Let me fix that. So the directions could say round these values to the nearest hundreds place. You'd want to find the digit in the hundreds place. I could say round to the nearest cent. That would be two decimal places out. So that would be the hundredths place. I could say round to the tenths. Okay, there's all different ways I could say this, but basically you're going to find that digit based on the place value that you're given. Okay, now once you have found the rounding digit, you want to look one single digit to the right. Okay, whether this is whole numbers or decimals, this is the same process. Find your rounding digit, look one digit to the right. All right, and what we have here, if the next digit is less than 5, keep the rounding digit the same. Don't do anything to the rounding digit, leave it alone. So whether decimals or whole numbers, locate your rounding digit, look one digit to the right. If that digit is less than 5, leave your rounding digit alone. Okay, now if the digit to the right of your rounding digit is 5 or more, then we want to increase the rounding digit by 1. Okay, so if the digit to the right is less than 5, leave your rounding digit alone. If the digit to the right of the rounding digit is 5 or more, add 1 to your rounding digit. Okay, and then it's step 4 where things get a little bit different. If you're dealing with a whole number, you find your rounding digit, you look to the right, you determine if you round up or down. Okay. Up is if the digit to the right is 5 or more, down is if the digit to the right is less than 5. And then all digits after that just become 0. However, if you're rounding decimals, it's slightly different. It's the same process to start. You find your rounding digit. If the digit to the right of that is less than 5, we round down. If the digit to the right is 5 or more, we round up, but then eliminate all the digits after the rounding digit if you're rounding a decimal, okay? And then for your answers, we do want to use this symbol. So instead of using like a typical equals, like just the two parallel bars, we would use this, which means approximately equal. Okay, so when you see that approximate, that like wavy equal sign, it typically indicates that there's been some kind of rounding that has taken place. Okay, so let's look at an example. So example 2 here, whoops, there. Example 2 says round 2,789.6318 to each place value listed below. So we're going to round it and then start over and round it and then start over and round it. Okay. So for the first part, part A, we're going to round to the thousands place. So let's see what we have here. So the thousands place is a whole number place value. So this is going to be to the left of the decimal point. So starting with the decimal point and then moving to the left, I have 9 in the ones place, 8 in the tens place, 7 in the hundreds place, and then 2 is in the thousands place. But I really want to look at the digit to the right of that, which is a 7. That is definitely more than 5. So I want to add 1 to my rounding digit. And everything after that is going to become zeros, except we don't have to put the decimal. You could sort of just put the decimal in like a single zero, but everything becomes zeros until you get to the decimal, and then you can just lop off the decimal. So we could say approximately 3,000. So essentially what we were asked to do is, hey, is this number closer to 2,000 or is this number closer to 3,000? Well, it happened to be closer to 3,000. Okay? So let's take that same number, the original one that we started with, and let's round it to the ones place. So the ones place is the first digit to the left of the decimal. So this 9 right here is in the ones place, but we're really interested in the digit to the right of that. To the right of that, we have a 6 that tells us to round up. So this is going to be slightly tricky here. If I add 1 to my rounding digit, which is a 9, well, that makes the 9 a 10, okay? So this first digit really becomes a 0, okay? It's the 0 in the 10. I don't know why it made that a perfect circle. And then that 1 in the 10, I'm going to go ahead and carry it. So it's going to make my next digit a 9. And then the first two digits, 2 and 7, they don't really change. And remember, we don't need the decimal points because we're rounding before the decimal. So we would say our final answer is approximately 2,790. So what was really being asked here is, were we closer to 2,789 or were we closer to 2,790? And in this case, we were closer to 2,790. And then finally, we're going to take that original number and we're going to round to the thousandths place. So that's this 1 right here. Directly to the right of that, I have an 8. That 8 tells me to round up, okay? So I'm going to add 1 to my rounding digit. So the 2, 7, 8, 9 before the decimal, they stay the same. And then after the decimal, we're going to get 6, 3, 2, and then just drop the zeros off after that. We don't need the zeros at the end. And that's it. So in this case, we rounded up on all of them. That was probably a typo on my part. I probably wanted us to round down at some point and just, oops, forgot. But there you have it. That is rounding to the thousands place, the ones place, and the thousandths place. All right. Next up, let's look at example 3. So example 3 says Earth is 92,955,807 miles from the sun. Round this distance to the nearest. We're going to round it 2 different times. So first we're going to round it to the nearest million. So we've got 92,955,807, and we want to round this to the nearest million. So starting at the far right, we want to move to the left and figure out which digits in the millions place. So we go ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, and then finally this first 2, or this 2 rather, that is in the millions place. So we want to look 1 digit to the right. Well, 1 digit to the right, we have a 9. That tells me to round up. So I want to add 1 to my rounding digit, which would make it a 3. And then everything after that, just make it a 0. So we would say that it is approximately 93 million miles. Earth is approximately 93 million miles from the sun. So what was really being asked here is, as far as the distance from the Earth to the sun, is it closer to 92 million or is it closer to 93 million? In this case, it was closer to 93 million. All right, let's start with the original value. So 92,955,809. And we want to round this one to the nearest 100,000. So again, starting far right, moving left because we're dealing with whole numbers. We've got ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s. I'm really making you all round up a lot. I don't know why I don't have it where you had to round down at all. All right, so this 9 is in the 100,000 spot. Directly to the right of that, we have a 5, which tells us to round up, so we want to add 1. And we've done this before. We're going to add 1. Well, when we add 1 to a 9, it makes the 9 a 10. So we kind of keep the 0 and then we carry the 1 from the 10. So then that 2 over here becomes a 3. So again, we get 93 million. So if we're going to round this to the hundred thousands place, it was closer to 93 million than it was 92,900,000. Okay, so we get 93 million again, approximately. All right, and then finally for this example, we're going to look at part 4. Hopefully I have you rounding down at some point because we've done a lot of rounding up so far. All right, example 4 says, on Monday, Samantha ran 4.738 miles. On Wednesday, she ran 6.482 miles. So part A says, round the miles run on Monday to the nearest tenth of a mile. So on Monday, she ran 4.738 miles. We want to find the digit in the tenths place. That's going to be the first digit after the decimal point. So we have a 7. To the right of that, we have a 3, which tells us finally to round down. That means we leave the 7 alone, and then we just chop everything after it off. Okay, so we're going to say that this is approximately 4.7 miles. So on Monday, Samantha ran approximately 4.7 miles. Now for part B, it says round the miles run on Wednesday to the nearest hundredth of a mile. So we get 6.482. The hundredths place, remember, after the decimal, we know we're dealing with those THS place values. So the hundredths place, starting directly after the decimal, we have tenths and then hundredths. Directly to the right of the digit in the hundredths place is a 2. That again tells me to round down. So I'm going to leave the 8 alone. Everything before it is fine too. And then I'm just going to chop the 2 off after. So I would say that she ran approximately 6.48 miles on Wednesday. Okay, so that is rounding. We did some whole number rounding. We did some decimal rounding. Just understand that the directions are almost the same until the very end, and you either make everything after a 0 or you chop everything after off, depending on if you're whole number or decimal. And that's it for this topic. The last topic is estimation, so we'll come back for that one.